Out live in Hong Kong. That's basically a fancy way of saying it broke the 1984 deal with Britain. But this is Beijing's hand one step removed, right? By empowering its hand-picked government in Hong Kong to remove lawmakers who are deemed to be disloyal, if you like.
And that's why we are seeing this international uproar. Just one day after these 4 opposition lawmakers were immediately disqualified because of this resolution passed by Beijing, we've heard criticism from the West as well as from pro-democracy leaders, as expected here in Hong Kong, as they try to make sense of the magnitude of this moment. You know, last night we witnessed the 15 remaining opposition lawmakers gather in the Legislative Council building. This is the parliament here in Hong Kong. They chanted, "Together we stand." They held hands and they announced their resignation en masse in protest. Among them, Claudia Mo, and she had this to say.
This act of resignation is not just in protest against Beijing's rule by decree. It's no longer rule of law. It's not even rule by law. It's rule by decree. And of course, we are also doing this in support of our 4 ousted colleagues.
Claudia Mo and the rest of the opposition are submitting their resignation letters this afternoon here in Hong Kong, one by one. And once those letters are submitted and accepted, that effectively brings about the end of dissent in the Legislative Council, again, the Parliament in Hong Kong, and it brings about the end of one of the last remaining forums for opposition here in the territory. International condemnation to Beijing's move has been swift. We heard from the UK Foreign Secretary, who said that these dismissals undermine Hong Kong's stability and tarnish China's international standing. We also heard from the National Security Advisor in the United States, Robert O'Brien, who said it was a gross violation of international commitments, but also threatened further sanctions in the remaining weeks of the Trump presidency, writing this, quote, "The United States will continue to utilize all the powers granted under the Hong Kong Human Rights and Democracy Act, the Hong Kong Autonomy Act, and the Executive Order on Hong Kong Normalization to identify and sanction those responsible for extinguishing Hong Kong's freedom." Now, China is fully aware of this condemnation and is not having any of it. In fact, we've heard from the Commissioner of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs Office here in Hong Kong, who addressed the criticism from these Western leaders head on. In his statement, we'll bring it up for you, writing this, quote, "Hong Kong affairs are China's internal affairs. Any interference in Hong Kong affairs will be firmly hit back by all Chinese people, including our Hong Kong compatriots. Any attempt to play Hong Kong as a card against China will reach a dead end," unquote. John, this is the new political reality in Hong Kong, and China is unwavering. Back to you.
What is interesting, though, is that locally the reaction seems to be not so much outcry at what's happened, but sort of ridicule of some of these lawmakers.
There has been ridicule. Some of these lawmakers, posters and banners that are hanging up, directing that ridicule directly at Carrie Lam, the chief executive. Look, it's a very changed political environment here in Hong Kong. The protests of 2019 are over as a result of the national security law. A chilling effect has been in place. We have seen the arrest of dozens of people, including Jimmy Lai, including a 19-year-old charged with secession. He could potentially face life in prison. A police hotline, John, was set up last week, allowing members of the public to call in and report any violations of the national security law. And within hours of that opening, it received thousands of calls. There is still an undercurrent of opposition, but the spirit of opposition, the open spirit of opposition in Hong Kong, that you can't see that often here.
Yeah. Kristie, thank you. Kristie Lu Stout there in Hong Kong. We appreciate that. Thank you.